Hello, and thank you for joining us for the Spring 2016 Students Abroad Parent Webinar sponsored by Notre Dame International. I'm joined this evening by Mike Kitts, professor in the College of Engineering, and Holly Rivers, the assistant director at the Kellogg Institute for International Studies. And my name is Tom Guinan. I'm the associate vice president for administrative operations here with Notre Dame International. Before we get into the agenda, I'd like to just go over a couple of administrative items. This presentation is being pre-recorded, and the slides and the video itself will be available on our website May 3rd or May 4th. We'll send a notice out about that once it's up and running. We haven't taken questions live for this webinar, but we have requested parents to send in their questions in advance, and we received many of them over the weekend, and I think we've actually responded to all of them that we received thus far. And for those that we haven't responded to yet, or those that are actually of such significance and interest to the broad community, we'll actually modify those and post them on our FAQ page, which you see the hyperlink at the bottom of this slide. So for the agenda for this evening, we'll talk a little bit about just the background on students abroad, especially focusing on the fall and the summer and fall terms. Then we'll speak a little bit about the health and safety considerations that are relevant no matter when students go abroad. And towards the end, we'll then touch on things that parents themselves should consider when their students are preparing to go abroad. And then we'll look a little bit about at the questions that were submitted and how we'll not only respond to the specific questions that were received, but how we keep the questions themselves updated in terms of our responses, and also how we make those responses available to the parents and to the university community. So in terms of the background on students abroad in the summer and fall particularly, one of the things that many parents, students, and even those in the university community don't realize is that we send more students abroad in terms of terms, in terms of the summer, fall, and spring terms. We send more students abroad in the summer term than we do almost combined for the academic year itself. We currently are expecting to send over 750 students abroad in the summertime, as compared to around 300 or 400 in the academic years for the semester-long programs. And in the summertime, we also have 25. Was that Nancy? Are you in there? Sorry.
Sorry. So you guys are practicing, but the email that went out actually said that it was going live tonight. So Elliot's getting calls and emails. Maybe not a big deal, but I did think if you guys are feeling confident, maybe we just go.
We can go.
Tom's the one that's got the burden on it.
Oh yes, that's true.
Yeah. Well, we could tell them that we'll record this. We'll just post it tonight. We'll post it right after it goes up because.
Okay. So she'll just respond and say that it's probably going to come up at
later this evening.
Later
this evening. We're still working because
I don't know who sent out the note, but
I think the parents group sent it out and they must have gotten the date wrong.
got it. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Nancy.
All right, we will respond accordingly.
Okay.
Weren't we really recording?
Well, we actually are. We are recording, so
Okay.
we'll
Edit
cut off
this.
the editing. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Good job, Josh.
Josh, I'm going to start back at the beginning, if that's okay. Geez, that's why somebody else was asking about it upstairs. Okay. Okay. All right. Are you ready? Okay, Josh, take two. Nice. Yeah.
Whoa.
We heard that. Okay. Take two. Okay. We can still hear you breathing, Josh. Okay, now it's done. Hello, and welcome to the Spring 2016 Students Abroad Parent Webinar, sponsored by Notre Dame International. My name is Tom Guinan. I'm the Associate Vice President for Administrative Operations at NDI, and I'm joined here by Mike Kitts, who's a professor in the College of Engineering, and Holly Rivers, who's an Assistant Director at the Kellogg Institute for International Studies. Before we get into our agenda, I just wanted to cover a couple of administrative items. This presentation is being pre-recorded, and the slides will be available on Notre Dame International's website. Actually, they will be available on May 2nd in the evening. We were thinking that it would be later in the week, but we should be able to get it up there right after we complete the recording. We aren't taking questions live for this webinar, but we did ask that you, parents, that you submit questions in advance, and we've received 10 or 15 questions. We've actually responded to many of those already because they were program-specific questions, but we will look at those questions that we receive in advance or that we'll get subsequent to this webinar, and we'll consolidate many of them and put them on our FAQ page, which has the hyperlink listed below. But we do respond to all questions that are submitted. We do send individual responses. So that's something that you should expect to hear from us one way or another based on the questions that you submit. We'll answer those as quickly as we can. So for the agenda today, we'll talk about, just give you some basic characteristics about specifically about our summer and fall programs. And then we'll talk a bit more about health and safety in some detail in terms of parents' roles, students' role, Notre Dame International's role, program director roles. And then we'll touch on some things that parents themselves should consider as they are preparing for their students to go abroad for the summertime and for the fall. And then we'll talk a little bit about how you can keep track of some of the questions that you may have and how you can get some of your specific concerns addressed. Okay, so this summer and fall programs, I just wanted to give you a little bit of background on the metrics for these summer and fall programs in terms of student participation. Most people here on campus and even in the university community don't realize that we send more students abroad in the summertime, in the summer term, than we do in either the spring term or the fall term. We're expecting that for this summer, over 750 students will go abroad on various Notre Dame programs. And we have estimated about 25 individual programs taking place in the summertime.
20.
Yeah. And in the fall and in the springtime, most people think of our typical semester abroad programs, which are longer in duration, but we have roughly about 400 students involved in those programs each semester. So the summertime is a huge time for flexible programming, and the students have a lot of flexibility in their own schedules, and so we see tremendous growth in the summer programs. And in general, because there's more flexibility, the programs also vary in the nature of, and activity that the students undertake. So in the summertime, we see a lot of research programming, internships, service learning. There's also the traditional classroom learning. The duration can be 3 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. It can be 1 week, a few days. It can be anything that fits the program's needs. And very importantly, with respect to the summertime, there are varying degrees of independence and oversight. So we'll hear a little bit about how we have some structured programs, and then we have some more independent programs that Mike and Holly will talk about. The fall programs, as I mentioned, they are traditionally thought of as our academic year, and in some cases the beginning of the full academic year, but also semester-long programs that run in the fall and the springtime. They're larger cohorts of ND students in a given location. So if you think about our London programs, our Dublin programs, where we have, in the case of London and Dublin, almost 200 students in those locations alone, we have larger cohorts that study together. Students typically take a full credit load, so these are full-time students. At least 12 credits they are taking while they're abroad, but in some cases 15 credits. But we're also seeing a lot more students take advantage of break period travel. So the fall break is a very active time for students to go abroad, even if it's just for 4 or 5 days. Your student may or may not know about those opportunities yet, but they may find out more about them as they get into their coursework in the fall, and that they make plans for the fall breaks.
Many of those are integrated into their classes.
Yeah, many of them are options that the students can participate in while they are taking the particular class. Some of them are mandatory, but it's things that the students may be aware of now that they've registered for their classes, but they may not know full details yet, and so they'll find out about those when they get back in the August time frame. In terms of just some general logistical information about our programs, and these are a couple of questions that come up frequently, Notre Dame doesn't monitor or approve personal travel while the students are abroad. So students will take advantage of opportunities on weekends or during downtime in their class schedules to go elsewhere while they're abroad. That's something that we know takes place, and we encourage it, but we are not monitoring it to approve students' travel plans on any given weekend, just like we don't approve those activities while their students are here on campus in South Bend. And our primary role when students are abroad is to coordinate their health and safety activities and make sure that anything that they would need from a health and safety perspective, that they are aware of what their roles are, what our roles are, what third parties would offer to the students as well. And so these are things that we just want to make sure that you as parents are aware of, and that we will talk through in a little bit more detail as we go forward. Now, though, I'd like to turn it over to Mike Kitts, who will talk to us a little bit about the summer engineering programs, and then Mike will transition over to Holly, who will talk about the Kellogg Institute programming.
Right.
Okay, Mike, thanks.
Thanks very much, Tom. Before I jump in and talk about the summer engineering programs, I want to say, just talk a little bit about, in general, about the value of these overseas programs. Before I had the opportunity to come back to Notre Dame to teach, I've been here now for about 3 years, I worked in large companies in corporate America. And when I recruited people, I often looked for people who had overseas experience from their college days. It showed that they had a curiosity, they had an ability to overcome obstacles, and all the change that takes place in the corporate world, and probably any kind of career that anyone's going to take, this willingness to step out and to step into other kinds of activities and challenges and overcome those challenges were traits that I look for. So I think it's great that your sons and daughters are moving into some of these kinds of programs. Now, more specifically about the engineering programs in the summer. We have many, many engineers, close to 180 engineers going on a 6-week program. We've got a number of programs. We've got one in Rome, 2 in London. In Dublin, we kind of we join the regular NDI program, and then we have one in Alcoy, Spain. Now, it's very popular for engineers because with their number of credits and their course schedule, it's very challenging for them to be able to go over the semester. So consequentially, these summer programs become very popular. Now, a few important aspects about these programs. Number one, they're led by Notre Dame professors. So we take our professors here from our South Bend campus, and they go to each of those 5 locations to teach the courses. They are courses that are offered here. Each student's going to get 6 credits, so taking 2 courses. And many of the professors have led these overseas programs before. The professors also go through a bit of training regarding students and how they help lead the students through the particular programs, not just the classroom setting. Second, we bring over RAs. These are typically graduating seniors. They will have they'll graduate in this case in about a week or so, but they will have just graduated when they go over to Europe with our students, and they have been on these summer programs. So they're there to both help the students get out and experience the cities very quickly and do so in a way that there's some good practices. For example, going out in groups and being mindful of the activities that you're doing, the students are doing when they go out. So each program, again, has these RAs. Now, these programs, Tom, you mentioned this, are very structured. So the students are in the classroom time together. We have structured trips during maybe a long weekend in Alcoy, where we take the students to Granada in Spain, in Rome, and in London. We have a lot of planned activities within the cities, historical sites, cultural sites. In the case of Rome, a lot of religious sites. So those are all planned. The students do it together. The RAs are part of that, and that is the structure. Now, the students still do travel on weekends, right, that you had mentioned, Tom, so they've got some independence, and certainly when they're not in the classroom, they can go and explore the cities in which they're living. But that structure helps them out a whole lot, and we do a lot of pre-planning.
Yeah, this is the engineering programs in the summer are probably the most rapidly expanding programs that we've seen over the last 3 or 4 years in terms of participation by the engineering students. And like you said, it's a great opportunity for engineers who are typically constrained during the academic year to go abroad, to take advantage of the structure that we have in our gateway locations, and to really experience what Notre Dame has to offer in somewhat of a compressed but highly structured environment. So that's great. And I think the students in engineering truly appreciate the opportunities. Now I'd like to turn it over to Holly, who's going to talk a little bit more about programs that offer more variety for students and are in a lot of ways more self-directed, and that she'll talk a little bit about what the Kellogg Institute has to offer.
Sure. So I have been at the Kellogg Institute for the last 14 years and have really watched the summer programming, especially these kind of independent programs, grow since I've been there. And I will say that one of the reasons that I wanted to do this work, and one of the things that I've used as an example to structure our programs, is that I was in the Peace Corps many years ago now, I should say. But that Peace Corps experience really helped guide me to understand what our students go through when I'm sending them off. And it also helped me really think about how we prepare our students and what kinds of support they need when they're in the field. So as Tom mentioned, there are a lot of different possibilities for the students. They can do research, they can do internships, they can do service learning, they can do language study, they can do things that we haven't even thought of yet. There's a lot of opportunity. And there are a lot of different entities on campus that are funding students. So I work at an international research institute. There are a number of international research institutes here on campus that are funding students. The College of Arts and Letters and the College of Science both have funding for students to do independent projects, as does the Language Center here, as well as the Career Center. So many different entities are funding students to help them go off and do projects during the summer. I'm specifically speaking about the Kellogg Institute and what we offer to students, and we have quite a variety just within the Institute. So the Kellogg Institute is an international research institute very much interested in democracy and human development. And as a result, that means that the students traveling with us are going to developing countries. So they're going to Africa, they're going to Latin America, they're going to Asia. And as a result, we have really unique projects coming through the Institute. I should say we have been sending students for many years. The 15 years that I've been at the Institute, yes, we've been sending students. We were sending smaller groups of students abroad even in the 90s. Mm-hmm. And one of the programs that we run is an internship program. So in that program, I actually am working with partners around the world. I am establishing what types of opportunities are available, and then students are writing applications and competing for the spots that we reserve with those organizations. So in that sense, I know the partners, we've been working with them for years, and the students are just competing to get to work with those organizations. On the opposite side of that, we also run research grants and fellowships. And in those situations, students are really saying, this is a topic I want to explore, or here's the research question I want to pursue. And then they're finding the organizations that they want to work with and proposing those to us. Now, they don't always just do that all on their own. They often work with faculty to find those organizations. They'll come to me to find those organizations. And all of them, before they submit a proposal in our competitions, must come and meet with me to talk about what country they're proposing to go to talk about their research question, to talk about what organization they're going to work with. And so we kind of guide them along that process. We don't do that alone. There's a center here for undergraduate scholarly engagement that actually works with the students to help them prepare those proposals. And in all those senses, they're getting a lot of faculty guidance to pull those proposals together. Ultimately, then we sit down with different faculty committees to determine who really should go. And so because we are providing the funding for those students, we really look through those proposals and pick the ones that we feel the most confidence in. And that means that we look at the topic that they're proposing. We look at the ability of the student to really determine whether we feel that student can carry out the project that he or she is proposing. We also look at their maturity level, and we get that through letters of recommendation to make sure that they really are prepared to go. And we also look at faculty support. Do they have someone who's really mentoring and guiding them along the way, not just through the proposal process, but also as they're preparing to leave and during that summer? If something comes up, do they have someone who will be a good resource to them to help them address that issue? This year, we ended up funding 47 students to go to 24 different countries. Now, that's just the first part. They got that proposal together, they made it through our process, but then we also require 8 hours of orientation over 3 nights. So those students will come in and we will talk about health issues very specific to developing countries. There are certainly issues they're going to encounter that they will not encounter in the United States. So we talk about those. We talk about, or we put them into scenarios, and we talk about scenarios and how they are going to be perceived as people from the US, as people with very different backgrounds, and help them to think about issues that they wouldn't even realize would be important while they are abroad. We bring a student panel together of students who went abroad last year, and we have those students talk about what are things they encountered that they didn't expect, and what did they wish they had known before they ever left, as well as what went wrong and how did they deal with that. And then on top of that, throughout that process, we're asking them to write down questions that they have. And on the very last night of that orientation, we split that group up. They're going to 24 different countries. So we split them up by country. So my 8 students going to Uganda will sit at a table, and my 3 students going to Argentina, and my 2 students going to Laos. And then we will invite in graduate students from those countries, as well as students who have been to those countries before. And we'll ask them to sit down over a meal and talk about the questions that they've been accumulating throughout our orientations, as well as we hand them a questionnaire and say, please address these questions. And they're very practical issues, from how do you know what a legitimate taxi is in the country where you're going, to how do you deal with unwanted attention when you're walking down the street. And we really have them talk through those issues country by country. I should add that while the other orientations are very strict and mandatory about how many hours you have to be there, the dinner is not, and that's always the one they want to stay the longest for. So it really gives them practical advice. Now, I should also add, we have a handbook, and that handbook lays out all of our requirements, as well as resources that are available to them as they prepare to go abroad, resources that are available to them while they are abroad, as well as resources here on campus that they can use when they get back. That has a lot of information in it. So if you have questions about what they're doing, probably the answers are in this handbook, and they have them whether they tell you they do or not. But they're a great resource, and we ask them to take that with them even while they're abroad. And then I should just add, once they go abroad, they're required to check in with us upon arrival in the country to make sure that everything is going well. But they're also required to check in with us every 2 weeks, to both my program coordinator and undergraduate programs and myself, to let us know how things are going, to let us know if there are things going wrong. It's important to us, not just because we're funding them, but because we also run 2 academic programs, the International Development Studies minor and the Latin American Studies minor. And many of the students that are working with us actually are fulfilling an academic requirement, because they are expected to be out in the field doing research, and they're going to come back to campus to write about that. So we have a very vested interest in that going well for them.
Well, that's great, Holly. And, I've learned many things just by hearing your presentation just now. But I think as parents, you can see the real contrast in the types of programmings that take place during the same few weeks in the summertime, and also the kind of expertise that's resident in each of these individuals in the programs that they run, and the level of preparation and the different type of preparation that's required for each of the programs. Now, as parents, one of the things that we'll talk about in a little bit is just the questions that you might want to ask your student in terms of making sure you understand which program they're actually on, who their sponsoring organization is. Because if they say, I'm going on a College of Engineering program to London or Dublin, that's a lot different in terms of preparation and expectations than if they're going on a program that's sponsored by the Kellogg Institute or any of the other number of institutes and centers that Holly mentioned that are also providing funding for the students. And so your students may be naturally reluctant to give you information that you ask for, but they do know much of what you're asking, and they've heard about it before in terms of details. And so continue to ask. You're probably asking good questions. Trust your instincts. If your child tells you they don't know how they're getting from the airport to the location, they probably do, but they're just not focused on it. But they have been given that information. And these are the types of things that the orientations that we provide to the students offer to them. And sometimes it bears repeating to them multiple times, which is fine. That's what we do, and that's why we're here.
Tom, you had one of your children go on one of these overseas programs. Did you have a lot of questions for them?
He's still abroad, and I'm still asking those questions. My son is in Rome now, and like many students, he's extending his time from the spring program into the summer to do an additional project. And so these are the sort of non-typical things that, as they come up, you want to say, okay, have you changed your plane ticket? Do you have a place to live? Do you have funding for your additional 2 months besides your parents? And so these are things that come up. You want to ask your children those questions, and sometimes they have thought of them, sometimes they haven't. And sometimes these are new experiences that you just want to say, I'm thinking about these things. Have you thought about these things? So one of the things that I wanted to focus on next as we shift gears a little bit is to focus on sort of the common elements of health and safety. So regardless of whether you're talking about a program in one of our European capitals, or if you're talking about programs in developing countries, Notre Dame as a whole, as a university, has a sort of a consistent emphasis on health and safety. And the thing that we emphasize most with the students is that they are the ones who most directly impact their own health and safety. So they make decisions while they're abroad, and they have to take ownership for their health and safety. They have to apply everything that they're told, and they have to know, in general, this support structure that's available to them. And so as I'll go through the list in sort of clockwise order, as it starts with parents. So the reason why we're talking to you is so that you can serve as a resource to your students if they have needs before they leave, while they're abroad. You need to know, you need to have as much information as possible to be able to support your children. Then as we go down around the circle, the U.S. government also offers a number of resources to U.S. travelers abroad, and we'll talk a little bit about things like the STEP registration program, so that the State Department knows that your students are in particular countries. That's required for the students to register their location so that they can be assisted in times of emergency. We also work, as Holly mentioned, with a number of third-party host institutions, some of which we have very long-standing relationships and some of which are new, but we want to make sure that the students realize while they're abroad, those third parties can serve as immediate resources and typically are the best resources in the time of an immediate need, such as an illness, a non-life-threatening or life-threatening illness, that the third parties will know how to support the students. We also have local government resources. So when you're in country, the police force, the government officials, they are as much resources to students abroad as a student here on campus would rely on the South Bend Police or the local police to help them in times of need. And then the HTH insurance is really a very important feature that is mandatory also for all of our students. It's a comprehensive medical insurance program that all Notre Dame students who are traveling on Notre Dame programs abroad are required to have. It's either funded by the programs or by our central university resources to make sure that students are not exposed in the event of a health emergency. And it also provides resources for parents of students who may need to travel to visit their students in the event of a serious situation. And then we have, of course, the Notre Dame home campus and abroad. So we have people like Holly and like Mike and my group in Notre Dame International and all of the other sponsoring units who provide resources for students before they leave. And then when they're abroad, especially in locations where we have our global gateways, they provide extremely valuable resources on the ground for the students so that the students have a connection to Notre Dame, whether they are in a Notre Dame location or whether they are in a more far-flung location where they still want to make sure that somebody on campus knows where they are, is attentive to their needs, and is able to support them in ordinary and extraordinary situations. So that's our general consistent framework that we have for students who are abroad in terms of the support that they would be offered. Now, the students are required to undertake a mandatory health and safety information session, and this would be in addition to anything that their program directors offer to them. So Mike and Holly have separate pre-departure meetings, as Holly went into some detail about in terms of how they prepare their students. But we have spoken with your students. Many students attended these sessions. We spoke to over 800 students on the 14th and the 18th, and we have other sort of one-on-one sessions for students who weren't able to make those sessions.
But a great session.
Yeah, they're in a classroom setting.
Yeah.
It's about 90 minutes long, and these are sessions where they are student-led in the sense that students provide their peer students, with their own experiences around these health and safety risks that they may experience while they are abroad in the summer or the fall. And we present these in kind of the order of prevalence. And so while we talk a lot about the more high-profile events like natural disasters, whether it's earthquakes in Ecuador or terrorist activities, which are extremely serious and certainly devastating, your students are more likely to experience some of the items on the top of this list than they would be some of the other more high-profile events. And so many students experience anxiety. Many students are subject to petty theft. More students get their cell phones stolen than anything.
A couple passports have been stolen.
Passports have been stolen.
We've got a way to help them with that.
Yeah. Transportation risks, students getting around, especially in some of the developing countries, that's a real significant issue, not in terms of only accidents, but just being able to know how to get around. Certainly alcohol and drug abuse are prevalent overseas, as they are prevalent on any college campus. And then more serious issues like sexual harassment and assault. These are all things that we present to the students and advise them to just be cognizant and to be aware of that they are real risks, and give them advice on how to prevent or mitigate those risks while they are abroad. And again, it's led by students, so the students share their own experiences. These students have been on study abroad or other international programs from years gone by, and it adds a level of credibility to the fact that these things happen, and they may happen to you or they may not, but the best thing you can do is to prepare yourself and to hopefully mitigate the events when they do happen, or to prevent them from happening at all.
On each of those topics, Tom, there were other things after the day or the 90 minutes together. The students could dive a little bit deeper for resources, and it remains accessible to them if they want to find more about local transportation, or they want to find more about mental health and anxiety.
Yeah, there are a number of online resources that we have available, a number of resources on our websites that help students just dig a little bit deeper into it, so that they can say, I heard something that was kind of relevant to me around transportation or around mental health and anxiety. And so it is something, it's a lasting resource that we offer to these students, and we found that it's very valuable, and they reflect on it and say, I'm glad I heard about that while I was in the session, the information session.
Usually they say that once they've experienced it and they come back.
Yeah. But I would say on all those things too, I mean, the people who are like in our programs, our professors and our RAs, we have knowledge of many of those things. And when they do come up with the students, we jump in and help them solve the problems. And if the problems are larger that we can even help solve, we will then also call on other Notre Dame resources.
Right. Yeah, and it's so this has been proven very effective, and so your students should have been to one of these sessions a couple of weeks ago, so you can talk to them about that as well, and ask them how enriching it was. I'm sure it was enriching. Okay. Now, as we move on to crisis situations, so crises do happen. It seems every semester there's something major that happens anywhere, any given place around the world, whether it's, again, a natural disaster, a terrorist event, or it's an individual crisis. We do have situations where students are involved in either accidents or they become ill. So we do want to just kind of share with you a little bit about how we prepare the students and what we expect of them, what we expect of parents, and what you can expect of us from the university. So for the students, the two words we use, prepare and respond. So we want the students, while they're abroad, to plan ahead, to be aware of the local resources, to be aware of their surroundings. The term situational awareness is what we use. If there are protests going on, if there's a major weather event that's happening, we want the students to be aware. We want them to have local, reliable news sources, so when they're abroad, they shouldn't be looking only at ESPN or the South Bend Tribune website, which may or may not offer you a lot of good resources. But find your local resource. Find it in a language that you can use, and then make sure you keep up with it so that you know what's happening. Students are also advised to keep their contact information updated, whether they have a new cell phone or they change residences, for instance, between the spring and the summer terms, if they move from one location to the other. Make sure that the university and that you, their parents, know where they're living and how to get in touch with them. Even though students travel abroad and they're not required to register or get approval for their travel, we do advise them to let people know where they are. So if they're leaving London, they should let Mike and his RAs know, hey, I'm going to be in Spain for 2 weeks or a week and a half, or well, actually,
No, not that long.
Just but I'm going for the weekend. Yeah, going for the weekend, and certainly Holly when they're in developing.
We gather all that information. And we have it.
It's very important because when something does happen, we need to know where the students are, and we also expect that they'll be able to respond to our communication requests. So if we know that they've left their program site and they're in a location where there's been a natural disaster, we want them to be able to, we want to be able to identify where they are and then be able to expect that they will respond to our requests. In general, we advise them to stay calm and focused so that if they do need to respond or to remove themselves from a dangerous situation, that they take stock of where they are and stay calm and just focus on keeping themselves safe. And then lastly, either before, during, or after a crisis, we want students to remember that they should keep in contact with their family. Typically, parents are the first people that students contact, and then parents will contact Notre Dame International oftentimes or not. We want students to make sure that the parents are aware of where they are, because the parents are the ones who are typically the most concerned about their well-being. In terms of Notre Dame's role, broadly speaking, our responsibilities are to confirm and assist. And so when an event happens that has a broad, far-reaching impact, we first try to identify all the students who may be impacted by that event. And then we contact those students. And in some cases, because the event is so broad, we do a worldwide confirmation where regardless of where we think the students should be on a given day, we know that because they are mobile, we just want to reach out to all the students, confirm their well-being, confirm their location. And then for those students who are in particular need, we will then work with them, focus our energies on supporting them and also their parents and relatives. And those are, if you think about the most effective response mechanisms, we first want to know who's safe and who is in a location that is safe and secure so that we can then say, okay, for those students who actually need our assistance, we focus all our energies on those students. And we also are responsible for communicating the status of students' location and well-being with university officials, because the president of the university all the way on down to program directors and deans and department chairs all want to know the status of their students and how their students are doing in a large-scale event that may impact any number of students. And then finally, parents, your role. Generally speaking, we describe it as supporting and sharing. So by supporting, we encourage you to encourage and remind your students of what's expected of them. Again, I'll emphasize for parents, you should make sure that your students know they should keep their contact information updated in the Notre Dame system. So if things change with their contact information, they should let their program directors know that things have changed. They should.
Somebody loses a cell phone, for example, they've got to update their cell phone number. So
yeah, and that happens. That happens
Yes.
all the time. And we've had situations where students have lost their cell phone, have not updated their information. They've provided a US cell phone number and have not updated it for their international cell phone number. And they may have told you, parents, their number, but they have not told their program directors the number.
And we should point out that a lot of the students who go to developing countries will not take their cell phone from the States, so they will get a cell phone once they arrive in country. And that means that Notre Dame doesn't have their cell phone number until they report that back in.
Yeah.
So it is important that they do that once they purchase the phone.
You know, in the case of our structured programs, the engineering ones, we provide local cell phones when the students arrive in their particular country. And then we have the RAs, in fact, gather all those numbers so that then myself as the director or the other local directors have that. And we also share that with Tom and his group. So we keep track of, and they're required to carry those cell phones so they can get a hold of us if they need to, and we can get a hold of them if we need to.
And those are the important questions. This is great that you're highlighting these distinctions, because those are questions that you as parents should ask your children now. What are you going to do about a cell phone? And they have likely been told you will need to get a new phone while you're abroad, or we will be giving you a phone, or will be some other arrangement that they will just need to find out. They may not know all the information, but within a day or two, you as parents should have their contact information, and that would be either the same as it was when they left or something new. We do want to make sure that students are not kind of in the dark for a period of time, and that means that you and we are in the dark as well.
Tom, I have found that a lot of students don't think about all these things as they're going through finals. And so,
That is true.
once they're done, then they turn their, our programs run a week after finals. So
Right.
then they turn their attention, and they're probably better able to communicate with their parents at that
So
point.
we'll cut the students some slack. It is finals right now. It is, as we're recording this, it is finals week. And so we understand that students usually live more day to day than we older adults do. So it is a good consideration. They may not have focused on it, but these are questions that you can ask them as they're packing their bags. We also do want you to remind students to respond to confirmation requests. So we will send out SMS text messages. We are working on new programs that make it easier for students to respond and to kind of get messages from the Central University and from their program directors. And so we want to make sure that they're aware that on a day-to-day basis, they may not respond to you, they may not respond to us, but if they are aware that some major event has happened, they should be aware that people will be looking for them. And so you as parents can say, listen, if you get emails from Notre Dame asking you to confirm your safety and your location, respond to them. And they'll listen to repetition, if nothing else. And then finally, I mentioned the HTH insurance. Students should know that they have HTH insurance, and you as parents should know that they have this insurance coverage, and the students should have their insurance information with them in the event something happens while they're abroad and they're taken to a hospital. as in the United States, the first thing a care facility will ask for is insurance information. And so HTH is something that they want to have with them and to be aware of in terms of their policy number and just generally how to access that service. We also want parents to have a healthy dialogue with their students about their travel plans. Mike mentioned my son who is abroad, and I try not to reference my own children while I'm doing these seminars, but it's relevant experience because he travels a lot and he doesn't tell us his whole itinerary while he's going away from his location in Rome. But it's good to know that on a given weekend, he will be in Amsterdam or he will be in Greece. And that's good for you as parents to know because you want to know where they're going to be on a particular weekend, the event something happens, or in the event that they lose their passport. You say, well, that's fine, we'll get a new one. And they say, well, I actually need my passport because I have to get back into the country that I left. And so these are things that you as parents can talk with your students about just to make sure you're aware of their plans. And then finally, parents, you are certainly encouraged as needed to contact Notre Dame as soon as you learn of an issue that may be impacting your students. You can contact the 24-hour line that we have available through Notre Dame International, and that's a cell line that you can text or call. And also the Notre Dame Security and Police line, which may be more familiar to you, is a 24/7 resource that they know how to route their calls to the appropriate program groups on campus so that even if it's just calling the security building here, we'll be able to funnel that information back to the relevant people on campus. So in non-crisis situations, these are, again, the more prevalent types of situations. Things happen around the world that may be of interest. There may be, we hear a lot about strikes that, transportation strikes that impact students while they're abroad. Again, weather events, lower level warnings and alerts. For the students, the same guidance applies. Know your surroundings, be able to respond. If your normal route to a class is cut off because of an event that's taking place in London, find another route, and your program directors will support you in those types of situations. From our perspective here on campus, we do monitor events that are taking place throughout the world. We have news services that support us and sort of proprietary news feeds that come to us to advise us of situations that take place around the world. The State Department resources are excellent in terms of understanding what the U.S. government thinks about particular events that are taking place. And we will contact students in a more routine fashion as we deem necessary to say, in this location, please be advised of this particular situation. And it applies to all programs. It's not just a particular program. It would apply to all students in a given location.
I mean, I'll give you an example, Tom. A couple of years ago in London, there were, I think the G20 were having
That's right.
their talks. And so our people in London at the Notre Dame Center made all the students aware of it. It was a certain part of town that wasn't too far from our center. And we just told the students, you're better off to avoid that area for this day. And word went out to the students, they followed it. And it was just a nice example of how the communication works and how we're able to help the students navigate day to day.
Yeah, and some students may have said, I'm fully aware of the G20 summit, I've been following, and some may have said, what
What's
the heck
the
is
G20?
that? What is the G20? Is that a
superhero group? Or,
right, yeah. So it is something that we try to, over an abundance of caution, advise students for things that might impact their programs. And then we also coordinate with the on-site resources so that we don't inundate the students. So in the Kellogg programs, we may not have much communication with the students at all on daily, day-to-day events, but we would know that the on-site coordinators would be contacting the students and saying these situations are arising and be aware of them. And for the non-crisis situations as parents, the students will always be your primary source of information. And what we encourage you to do is always ask them first about their situation, because for reasons of privacy and otherwise, we're also not able to tell you many things that you may want to know about your students. But they are your primary source of information, and you're certainly able to contact us if you have immediate concerns. If you're not able to get in touch with your child or you just have a sense that something's not quite right, contact the Notre Dame, either your program director or those phone numbers that we had indicated earlier. Okay, some other sort of non-stressful items for your parents to consider, some fun stuff, if you will. Your students you should encourage them to explore their program locations. So when they're in London, London's a big city. 6
Wow.
weeks is not that long of a time. Encourages students not to feel as if every weekend they have to jump off to 6 different locations in Europe. And likewise, if they're in sort of a more independent, structured program, it's probably more intense anyway, so that they have less time to sort of jump all around the continent. But encourage them to get to know their program location. And there's a practical reason for that as well. Travel abroad while you're abroad can be very expensive. And so students on limited budgets should know you're going to burn through your money as fast as you'll burn through your flex points here on campus if you're not careful. And it can also be disruptive to the coursework. So there's certainly an exciting element to being abroad, and you want to see as much as possible, but you're there for a reason. I think Holly really emphasized there's a pre, during, and post component of what these students are doing, and that's really why they are in these programs.
And I would add, as you said, 6 weeks or 8 weeks or 4 weeks is not a very long period of time. And if you're going to go and actually get to know a community or any place, then really you need to spend the time there.
Yeah.
And so, you know, for us, oftentimes students are living in families that really want to get to know them and show them their culture and their family life. And there's a lot of value in being
Right.
in that one
It's
place.
probably sometimes that's the most enriching aspect of the experience, is really digging in and getting to know your particular location. So finally, in terms of questions from parents, what I have in front of you is a screenshot of the frequently asked question pages for parents along with the hyperlink. As I mentioned earlier, most of the questions that we got in advance of this webinar were program specific, and so those are best answered directly by our program directors. So I forwarded them to the program directors, who have responded to many of you already. You will get a response from us one way or the other. And again, if the questions are of a general nature, they may either already be on the FAQs, or we'll add them to the FAQ in a way that provides more relevance for the broad community for the summer or for the fall programs. And so we'll be updating the FAQs periodically, and you can jump on out to that website whether your students are going abroad or whether they're thinking of going abroad, and you just want to have some background information about how Notre Dame International manages their many programs abroad. And then finally, again, this presentation will be posted on the Notre Dame International website, and so there'll be some reference web pages for you. Of course, the NDI homepage, which then will take you off to in the various links to the many other programs that we have on campus. And if you have questions, feel free to email them to the ND International General website, and we will address them as quickly as possible and send them to the most appropriate resource who will be able to give you the best answer. And I think that's, in terms of what you would need to know as parents, I think those are two very helpful sources of information or resources that are available to you. With that, that brings this webinar to a close. I would like to thank Mike Kitts,